The heat outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. Late July in Savannah always felt thick, like the air had weight. Inside the kitchen, I was chopping honeydew and strawberries, pretending not to feel the ache that had started to settle in my chest these past few months. Loneliness has a way of going quiet before it gets loud again. My husband, Mason, was gone for the third week straight. Some corporate training upstate, or so he said. I'd stopped asking for details a long time ago. The house, meanwhile, had become a museum of silence. Except when Eli was home. He wasn't mine, not by blood. Mason's son from a previous marriage. 21. College junior. All long limbs and confidence, but lately, something else. Something quieter behind the eyes. That afternoon I heard the familiar creak of the back door. A breeze came with it, and then him. "Hey," Eli said, stepping inside with his usual loose swagger, shirt clinging slightly to his chest from the heat, curls damp around his temples. "Need help?" His voice was casual, but something in it hesitated. I looked up from the cutting board. His gaze wasn't on the fruit. It was on me. "Sure," I said, sliding the cantaloupe toward him. "You get this side, I'll finish the berries." He washed his hands, then stood closer than he needed to, at the edge of the counter. His shoulder brushed mine lightly once. Then again, less accidental. I didn't flinch. His fingers were clumsy at first, slicing too shallow, then too deep. I reached to steady his hand and our knuckles grazed. He froze. I pretended not to notice. "Here," I said gently, adjusting his grip. The touch lingered longer than it should have. When I let go, neither of us said anything for a moment. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft drag of his knife against the board. But I felt his eyes on me. Not constantly, just glances. Measured. Heavy. Curious. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't been brave enough to touch until now. When the salad was finished, I slid it into a cold bowl, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and leaned against the counter. Eli was watching me again, and not like a stepson watches a parental figure. More like a man looks at something he isn't sure he should want. "You okay?" asked, my voice light. "Yeah," he said quickly, eyes darting away. "Just thinking." He stood there for a second longer, then muttered something about needing to check a call and disappeared down the hall. I stayed in the kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the sink, trying to slow the thudding in my chest. I told myself it was nothing. That he was young. That maybe he was just awkward. But something about the way he looked at me, the silence between us, felt like a door had creaked open. Not enough to walk through, but just enough to feel the heat from the other side. 2 days passed with little more than polite exchanges. Good mornings. Plates cleared. Empty space. But every time I caught Eli walking through the hall, barefoot, half-dressed from a midday nap, my breath stalled in my throat for half a second too long. He was staying longer than usual this summer. Something about an internship falling through. I didn't ask questions. Mason didn't seem to care. Friday afternoon, the sun was high and vicious. I tossed a towel over my shoulder, grabbed a book, and headed to the backyard. The pool shimmered like glass, undisturbed. It had been weeks since anyone used it. I settled into the lounge chair, letting the sun bake into my skin. I didn't swim, not at first. Just let the heat pull everything still inside me to the surface. Then I heard the screen door. And the quiet thud of bare feet against the stone. I didn't have to look up. Eli's voice found me a moment later. "Didn't think I'd find you out here." I turned my head slightly. He stood at the edge of the patio, towel in hand, wearing only swim trunks that clung too closely for polite observation. His chest glistened, damp with sunscreen or sweat, I wasn't sure. "You planning on getting in?" I asked, forcing a casual smile. He shrugged. "Only if you are." I raised my sunglasses. "I'm fine right here." But I wasn't. Not with the way his eyes trailed slowly from my ankles up the line of my thighs. Not with the heat that had nothing to do with the Georgia sun. He walked to the edge and dove in with a clean arc. Water splashed, cool mist settling across my legs. I didn't flinch. But I watched him. His body cut through the water in long, confident strokes. He surfaced near the deep end, brushing his hair back, blinking water from his lashes. "You sure?" he called. "Feels incredible." "I'm good," I said, not trusting what might happen if I moved closer. He swam toward the edge near my chair, resting his arms on the pool's edge, chin tilted slightly, eyes locked on mine. "You've been quiet lately," he said. Voice low. Controlled. Just tired, I offered, turning a page in a book I hadn't read for 10 minutes. His eyes didn't move. There was something in them, not hunger exactly. Not yet. But curiosity laced with tension. Kind of quiet challenge. You ever think about leaving? He asked suddenly. That caught me off guard. Leaving? He shrugged again, water dripping from his shoulders. Just starting over. Somewhere else. Somewhere you don't feel like someone's shadow. I stared at him. He'd said it too easily. Too knowingly. You feel like a shadow, Eli? His mouth lifted slightly. Sometimes. Do you? I didn't answer. Because the truth was yes. More than I wanted to admit. More than I wanted him to see. After a long pause, he pushed himself up out of the pool. Water spilled down his chest, over his abs, pooling at his waistband before sliding down his legs. He reached for the towel, catching me looking. And he didn't look away. Neither did I. For the first time, I didn't pretend. The house always felt different at night. Quieter, yes. But not peaceful. Restless. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, the tile cool against my skin. The fridge hummed softly in the dark. I wasn't thirsty really. I just needed something to do with my hands. Something that didn't involve thinking about how the heat on my skin had nothing to do with the weather. I opened the cabinet, reached for a glass, and froze. Eli was already there. Leaning against the counter, shirtless, bathed in the silver of the stove light. A bottle of water in his hand. A question in his eyes. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I. The air between us felt charged. Not dramatic, not explosive. Like the pause between lightning and thunder. You're up late, I finally said, my voice softer than I meant. Couldn't sleep, he replied, then added after a beat. Didn't think you'd be up. I held his gaze for a second too long. Couldn't sleep either. We stood there, on opposite ends of the kitchen island, the counter a pathetic excuse for distance. Then softly, Clara, can I ask you something? I tensed. You just did. He smiled faintly, then looked down at the water in his hands like it might help him get the words out. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? My chest tightened. What do you mean? He looked up again and there it was. Not a boy. Not a stepson. A man. Like you're playing a role, he said. One you never auditioned for. I swallowed, suddenly aware of every sound in the room. The hum of the fridge. The ice ticking in my glass. My pulse in my ears. Yes, I whispered. All the time. He took a step closer. Slow. Careful. Testing the edge. I think about you, he said. Quiet. Dead honest. Eli. I know, he said quickly, hands raised like he could stop the guilt from forming between us. I know I shouldn't. I know it's wrong. But I can't stop. The words hung in the air, raw and trembling. My breath caught. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at me? He asked, softer now. You think I don't feel it too? I closed my eyes. Because yes, I felt it. Long before this moment. Long before I was willing to admit it. When I opened them again, he was closer. Still not touching me, but I could feel the heat coming off his skin. And then, with a voice that felt like it came from somewhere deep and unguarded, he whispered, You don't have to pretend with me. I wanted to tell him to stop. To walk away. To forget. But I didn't. Because I didn't want him to. Instead, I stood there, my hand tightening around the glass, and whispered the only truth I had left. This isn't safe. He nodded. But it's real. And that, more than anything, terrified me. I should have walked away. I should have said his name with a final tone. Turned. Gone back upstairs. Pretended that this never hovered between us. But I didn't. I stood there, barefoot, glass sweating in my hand, heart trying to pound its way out of my chest, and let it happen. Eli reached for me. Not forcefully. Not urgently. Just gently. As if he was giving me a chance to stop him. When his fingers touched my wrist, I flinched. Not from fear, but from how much it felt like permission. He was so close now, I could see the faint freckle near his collarbone, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. I could smell clean skin, mint from his water, something unmistakably him. My glass clinked against the counter as I set it down with trembling fingers. Clara, he whispered again, like a prayer and a warning all in one. And I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was both of us meeting somewhere in the middle of everything we shouldn't have felt. and everything we couldn't stop feeling. His lips brushed mine. A test. A question. I answered. I kissed him back. Not hard. Not urgent. But like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and was finally allowed to exhale. His hands rose slowly, cupping my face, tentative at first. As if he expected me to vanish the second he touched me too much. When I didn't, when I leaned in instead, something in him cracked open. He kissed me deeper. Needier. Like he'd been waiting for this. Like he didn't know how to stop once he started. My hands found his sides, warm skin under my palms, muscles tightening beneath my touch. His breath hitched when I slid my fingers up his back, nails grazing lightly. He groaned against my mouth. The sound was low, rough, almost reverent. I pulled away just enough to look at him. His eyes were darker now. White. His lips kiss-swollen. This can't happen, I said, even though it already was. I know, he whispered, brushing his thumb across my cheek. But it is. That was the moment. The tipping point. No going back. He kissed me again, and this time I didn't hesitate. I leaned into it. Into him. Into the ache I'd buried under months of being invisible. His mouth found my throat. My collarbone. His hands, bolder now, slid down my back, pulling me closer until I could feel his heartbeat against mine. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was feeling. And for the first time in too long, I felt wanted. Not for what I could offer. Not out of duty. Just me. We didn't speak as he followed me down the hallway. The only sound was the whisper of our feet on hardwood, the shallow rise of breath between us. My bedroom door clicked shut behind us, sealing something sacred, or dangerous, or both. The way his eyes drank me in the low light made my knees weak. He reached for me like he'd been memorizing me in pieces and now finally had the chance to see the whole. When he touched me again, it was slower. More careful. Less desperation, more intention. As if this wasn't about conquest, but about confirmation. Woke before the sun did. The room was still, painted in the blue-gray hush of early morning. My back was warm. His arm lay draped over my waist, fingers resting lightly against my stomach, like he was still holding on even in sleep. And for a brief second, before the guilt, before the memory, before the ache, it felt beautiful. Like something I'd spent years pretending I didn't need. I closed my eyes, let myself breathe in the smell of him on my skin, the echo of his name in my bones. But it didn't last. Reality never does. I slipped out from under his arm quietly, carefully, like removing a page from a book without ripping it. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection under dim light. I didn't look different. And yet, everything felt different. The lines around my eyes weren't from age. They were from years of being looked at without being seen. But Eli had seen me. Too well. By the time I made it to the kitchen, the coffee was brewing. I stood barefoot in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, trying to figure out how to feel something other than lost. Eli walked in not long after. Hair messy from sleep. T-shirt half tucked. That same look in his eyes, the one I'd seen before he ever touched me. Something between hope and hesitation. "Morning," he said, voice low and cracked from sleep. I nodded. "Coffee's almost done." Silence stretched between us. Not cold. Not awkward. Just full. He poured himself a cup, then leaned against the counter, watching me. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said finally. "Unless you wanted to." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." "That it was a mistake?" he asked, eyes unreadable. "No," I said too quickly. "Not that." Another pause. "Then what?" I looked at him, really looked, and felt the ache settle somewhere between my ribs and my throat. "It can't happen again." He didn't flinch. But something behind his eyes dimmed just slightly. "I figured," he said. "But that doesn't mean it didn't matter," I added softly. His gaze met mine, something flickering there. Pain maybe. Or longing. "I know," he said. "It mattered to me too." The rest of the day passed like a film playing too slow. We moved around each other carefully. Dishes, doors, footsteps, glances. Mason came home in the afternoon, dropping keys on the table, kissing my cheek in passing. I smiled. I laughed at his stories. I poured him a drink. And all the while Eli sat across the room. Silent. Watching. Knowing. That night I found a note tucked under my pillow. Just one line in Eli's handwriting. "You don't have to pretend with me. Not ever." I stared at it for a long time. Then folded it gently. and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. Not because I planned to forget, but because some things don't disappear. They just wait. A week passed. No words. No more notes. No mistakes repeated. Just silence. The kind of silence you don't dare disturb because it's holding too much. Eli moved out 2 days earlier than planned. Said his friend in Charleston had a room ready. Said he needed a change of scenery. He didn't say goodbye. Not directly. I found his hoodie folded on the chair outside. The one he always left slung over the backrest like it lived there. And inside the pocket, a gum wrapper with 2 words scribbled in ink. Still here. The night after he left, Mason fell asleep early as he often did when he drank too much and talked too little. I stayed on the porch, curled in the blanket Eli once brought me, the summer heat finally breaking into something bearable. I sat there with a glass of wine and a truth that wouldn't leave me alone. I didn't regret it. Not the kiss. Not the touch. Not the way he looked at me like I was a woman, not just someone's wife. What I regretted was how long it had taken me to feel anything at all. People will tell you stories like this are about guilt. They'll say it's about broken rules and shame and silence. But this was about waking up. Waking up from years of being tolerated. Years of going unnoticed. Years of folding laundry and smiling at the right times and pretending I didn't feel invisible. Eli didn't save me, but he reminded me that I was still a person. Still capable of want. Of ache. Of being wanted in return. I don't know if I'll see him again. I don't know what I'd say if I did. But sometimes late at night, when the cicadas fall silent and the air is too still to pretend, I'll find myself whispering those same 2 words back into the dark. Still here.